This is a matter for the executive.
Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for that answer. The United Kingdom proudly sits at the heart of global motorsport, including having hosted a round of the World Rally Championship virtually every year since its inception in 1973. So will my honourable friend agree with me that it is important that the UK continues to host a round of this championship, and will he do everything possible to work with the Northern Ireland Executive and all parties involved to see a round of the WRC hosted in Northern Ireland in the coming years?
In wishing my honourable friend a happy birthday, I welcome his points he makes about the UK's leadership in the space of motorsports, and I think Northern Ireland would produce an excellent backdrop for hosting an event of this sort. I would be very happy to continue to work to support the executive in this regard in terms of any future bids.
Final question, John Speller. 21, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State and I have regular conversations with ministerial colleagues regarding transport connections, which are particularly important for Northern Ireland given its unique position. Connectivity across the UK is vital to fuel Northern Ireland's economic recovery and strengthen the Union. The Prime Minister commissioned a Union connectivity review to consider these important connections, including the feasibility of a fixed link between Northern Ireland and Great Britain.
Well, in those discussions, couldn't the Minister get together with the Transport Department and point out the huge cost, the geological problems and the inconvenient reality that Britain and Ireland operate on a different rail gauge? Isn't it time to dump this project at an early stage, along with the Garden Bridge, into the bin and save a lot of money and effort and probably a few column inches in articles?
Well, I have to say, I'm not impressed with the honourable gentleman's lack of ambition. I want to make sure that we look at all options to support connectivity to Northern Ireland. I'm grateful that we have a Prime Minister who is willing to do that.
Right, that ends Northern Ireland questions. We're now coming to questions to the Prime Minister. I will first call the Prime Minister to answer the engagements question, and then we'll call Kim Johnson. So, Prime Minister, your engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It will be 3 years tomorrow since a chemical weapon was deployed by Russian military intelligence on the streets of Salisbury. All our thoughts remain with those affected, their families and loved ones, and we will continue to seek justice for them. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure this House will want to pay tribute to the people of Salisbury and Amesbury and wish them well for the future. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Let's head to Kim Johnson. Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Liverpool is a welcoming city, the oldest Chinese community in Europe, but in 1946, the British government ordered the forced repatriation of thousands of Chinese seamen living in Liverpool with their British families back to China, causing lasting emotional trauma. Many of those descendants still live in my Liverpool Riverside constituency. Will the Prime Minister take steps to acknowledge these events and provide the descendants with a formal apology and for the justice they deserve? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, I have happy memories of my own visits to Liverpool, and I can tell her that we are certainly very grateful across the country to the Chinese community for their amazing contribution, and her message has been heard loud and clear.
Right, let's head to John Stevenson. John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Pirelli factory in Carlisle employs around 800 people, contributes hundreds of millions of pounds to the local economy, and is an exporter. Its location is a consequence of regional economic policy from 50 years ago. Would the Prime Minister agree that if we are to rebalance the economy, level up the country, we need a modern-day proactive regional economic policy? And if he does agree, will he come to Carlisle to see the old and new in action?
Prime Minister. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for what he says, and he will hear more in just half an hour or so. Let's try and keep it to half an hour, Mr. Speaker, from the Chancellor about how exactly we intend to make sure we build back better across the whole of this country and unleash the tremendous potential of the whole of the United Kingdom, including, of course, Carlisle, which he so well represents.
The Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about the Salisbury atrocity? Does the Prime Minister agree with President Biden that the sale of arms that could be used in the war in Yemen should be suspended?
Mr. Speaker, ever since the tragic conflict in Yemen broke out, this country has scrupulously followed the consolidated guidance of which he will be well aware.
The trouble is that whilst President Biden has suspended arms sales that could be used in Yemen, the UK hasn't. In fact, we sold £1.4 billion of arms to Saudi Arabia in 3 months last year, including bombs and missiles that could be used in Yemen. Given everything we know about the appalling humanitarian cost of this war, with innocent civilians caught between the Saudi coalition and the Houthi rebels, why does the Prime Minister think it's right to be selling these weapons?
Mr. Speaker, the UK is part of an international coalition following the UN resolutions, which he will know well, which are very clear that the legitimate government of Yemen was removed illegally. Those are the resolutions that we follow, and we continue scrupulously to follow the humanitarian guidance, which are amongst the toughest measures anywhere in the world in respect of all arms sales. He talks about humanitarian relief, Mr. Speaker, and actually I think the people of this country can be hugely proud of what we are doing to support the people of Yemen. Almost £1 billion of aid contributed in the last 5 years, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, he says the system's very robust in relation to arms sales. It can't be that robust. The government lost a court case just 2 years ago in relation to arms sales. The truth is the UK is increasingly isolated in selling arms to Saudi Arabia. Despite what's happening in Yemen, despite Saudi Arabia's human rights record, and the brutal murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, a murder the US has concluded was approved by the Saudi Crown Prince. So I have to ask, what will it take for the Prime Minister to suspend arms sales to Saudi Arabia?
Mr. Speaker, we could condemn the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. We continue to call for a full investigation into the causes of his death, and indeed we have already sanctioned 20 people, Mr. Speaker, in Saudi Arabia. And I repeat the point that I have made, that the UK government continues to follow the consolidated guidance, which, by the way, Mr. Speaker, was set up by the Labour Party.
Mr. Speaker, to make matters worse, the government decided this week to halve international aid to Yemen. Halve it. The UN has said that Yemen faces the worst famine the world has seen for decades. And the Secretary-General said on Monday that cutting aid would be, in his words, a death sentence for the people of Yemen. How on earth can the Prime Minister justify selling arms to Saudi Arabia and cutting aid to people starving in Yemen?
Mr. Speaker, it is under this government that we have increased aid spending to the highest proportion in the history of our country. And yes, it is true that current straitened circumstances, which I'm sure the people of this country understand, mean that temporarily we must reduce aid spending. But that does not obscure the fact, Mr. Speaker, that when it comes to our duty to the people of Yemen, we continue to step up to the plate. A contribution of £214 million for this financial year. There are very few other countries in the world, Mr. Speaker, that have such a record, that are setting such an example in spending and supporting the people of Yemen.
Keir Starmer.
This week, the government halved our international aid to Yemen. If this is what the Prime Minister thinks global Britain should look like, he should think again. And if he doesn't believe me, doesn't like it from me, or the UN Secretary-General, he should listen to his own MPs. Just this morning, the Conservative MP for Bournemouth East said, cutting support to starving children is not what global Britain should be about. It undermines the very idea of the UK as a nation to be respected on the global stage. And the Honourable Member for Sutton Coldfield said this was unconscionable. Will the Prime Minister now do the right thing and reconsider this urgently?
Mr. Speaker, I repeat, we've given £1 billion since the conflict began. We're in support of UN resolutions. This year, we're contributing another £214 million to support the people of Yemen. There are very few other countries in the world, Mr. Speaker, that have that kind of record. I think in these tough, straitened circumstances, bearing in mind the immense cost of the COVID epidemic that has affected our country, I think the people of this country should be very, very proud of what we are doing.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, Britain should be a moral force for good in the world. But just as the US is stepping up, the UK is stepping back. If the Prime Minister and Chancellor are so determined to press ahead with their manifesto-breaking cuts to international aid, cutting the budget to 0.5%, they should at least put that to a vote in this House. Will he have the courage to do so?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are going to get on with our agenda of delivering for the people of this country and spending more than virtually any other country in the world. By the way, spending more still than virtually any other country in the G7 on aid. It's a record, I think, of which this country can be proud. Given the difficulties that this country faces, Mr. Speaker, I think that the people of this country will think that we've got our priorities right. He can't work out, Mr. Speaker, what his priorities are. 1 minute he's backing us on the roadmap. The next week he's turning his back on us. One week, well, he can't even address a question on the issues of the hour. He's going to have he could have asked anything about the coronavirus pandemic, Mr. Speaker. Instead, he's consecrated his questions. Entirely to the interests of the people of Yemen, Mr. Speaker. We are doing everything we can to support the people of Yemen, given the constraints that we face. We're getting on, Mr. Speaker, with a cautious but irreversible roadmap to freedom, which I hope that he will support. And very shortly, Mr. Speaker, you will be hearing a budget for recovery.
I think I already know most of it. Dr. Liam Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend will be aware that when devolution was established in Scotland, there was no separate Scottish civil service created. We have a UK civil service with UK ministerial oversight. Given the turmoil in Scottish politics, will he then confirm that any civil servants who feel pressurised to behave inappropriately have a mechanism to seek redress beyond the ministers to whom they are immediately answerable?
Of course, thank my right honourable friend. Of course, we will support all civil servants. By the way, I thank them for their work up and down the country that they've done throughout the pandemic. And I think everybody in this House would agree that now is the time, really, for our civil service to focus on working together to build back together, rather than build back better together, rather than on measures that might divide our country, Mr. Speaker.
Now comes the leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister on the terrible atrocity 3 years ago in the town of Salisbury? Mr. Speaker, the situation in Yemen has been called the world's worst humanitarian crisis. 100,000 people have been killed. 16.2 million are at risk of starvation. 2.3 million children, Prime Minister, are at death's door, facing acute malnutrition. The UK government's response isn't one of compassion. Instead, it is to impose cuts. That's what you're doing, Prime Minister. A 50% cut to international aid to Yemen, a move that the UN chief Antonio Guterres has described as a death sentence. Since the start of the war, the Tories have shamefully backed the Saudi regime through billions of pounds of arms sales and support, despite evidence of war crimes and of the targeting of civilians. Will the Prime Minister confirm that today's budget will force through the devastating cuts to international aid?
Mr. Speaker, I think anybody listening to this debate will have heard me say that this country, this government, in the last 5 years has given £1 billion to support the people of Yemen. I can tell him that on Monday, Mr. Speaker, in case he thinks there's any diminution of our efforts, on Monday we're going to provide cash support to 1.5 million of the most vulnerable Yemeni households, support 400 health clinics and treat 75,000 cases of severe malnutrition, Mr. Speaker. That is the continuing effort of the British people and the British government to help the people of Yemen.
In Blackford.
The reality, Mr Speaker, is a 50% cut to Yemen aid at a time of a global pandemic. The coronavirus has hit poor and vulnerable countries the hardest, threatening decades of hard-won gains whilst exacerbating existing inequalities. During his leadership race, the Prime Minister made a commitment to stand by 0.7% for aid spending, a position he reaffirmed in June last year at that very dispatch box. What followed was yet another U-turn, another broken promise. Why is the Prime Minister breaking his own manifesto commitment? And why are his government breaking the promises they made to the world's poorest?
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, I think most people in this country will know that the government has given £280 billion to support the people, the economy, the livelihoods, the businesses, up and down the whole of the United Kingdom. And that has, as you will hear from the Chancellor, Mr. Speaker, placed strains on our public finances. Meantime, we continue to do everything we possibly can to support the people of Yemen, including, by the way, through a massive vaccination programme to which the people of this country have contributed £548 million, the second biggest contributor in the world, Mr. Speaker.
Well,
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will know from his time working in the Black Country how important our green spaces and green belt are. Will he make sure that Dudley Council and our Mayor Andy Street have the powers and the resources they need to ensure development is on brownfield rather than valuable green spaces, and make sure that local people's voices are clearly heard and taken into account, including where the proposed development is across local authority borders, like in the surrounding Greenbelt to Dudley Centre?
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we will protect our green belt, our vital green belt, and which constitutes, I think, 12.4% of our land. But we can build our homes, as my honourable friend rightly suggests, 300,000 of them on brownfield sites across the country.
Let's head to Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. Sir Geoffrey.
Mr. Speaker, we are now into the third month of the Northern Ireland Protocol, and we're fast approaching the end of the three-month grace period. And the Prime Minister will be aware of the disruption that the protocol is causing to trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the damage it's doing to the stability of the political institutions established under the Belfast Agreement. What action does the Prime Minister intend to take to deliver on his promise that he would protect Northern Ireland's position within the UK internal market and provide us with unfettered access to goods from Great Britain?
Mr. Speaker, the position of Northern Ireland within the UK internal market is rock solid and guaranteed. We are making sure that we underscore that with some temporary operational easings in order to protect the market in some areas, such as food supplies, pending further discussions with the EU. And as I've said, I think to the right honourable gentleman and his colleagues, we leave nothing off the table in order to ensure that we get this right.
Sarah Atherton.
Mr. Speaker, our British vaccine finished in Wockhardt in Wrexham has shown the globe exactly what the UK can achieve. In Wrexham, we have the Myler Hospital, Coleg Cambria, Glendower University and an industrial estate bristling with SMEs. We're close to the Midlands and the North West. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that now is the time for our young people to look at careers and aspire to careers in STEM and healthcare, and Wrexham is the hub that can take us forward?
Yeah. My honourable friend is completely right. I thank her, by the way, again for her amazing service in the NHS in Wrexham and her returning to the front line. And actually, it was in Wrexham at Wockhardt that I met young female scientists, Mr. Speaker, who are helping to make the vaccine that is not only going to free our country, we hope, from the captivity of COVID, but help to liberate the entire world. It was wonderful to see it happening in Wrexham. We want to see many more young female scientists growing up in that part of the world.
Let's head to Graham Morris. Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask about an important domestic issue. The system of property tax in England is broken. Council tax places an unfair burden on people living in the poorest communities without generating the revenues needed to fund local services. So does the Prime Minister agree that a proportional property tax, as proposed by the Fairer Share campaign, would create a transparent property taxation system, generate revenues local government needs, and ease the tax burden on hard-pressed families across the country, including in my constituency of Easington.
Mr. Speaker, with great respect to the honourable member, what the country needs are councillors that charge you less whilst delivering better services. And if you look across the country, you can see that it's overwhelmingly Conservative-run councils that do that, Mr. Speaker. The right honourable gentleman opposite laughs, and Mr. Speaker, Westminster, they kept council taxes low. In Camden, where he lives, it's 3 times as high. That's the difference, Mr. Speaker.
Sir David Evans. Last Friday, my constituent, Mr. Luke Belfield, who was aged just 18, was stabbed to death just a few miles from his family home. This has been horrendous for his family and his friends who've been left behind, and my heart goes out to them all. What more does my right honourable friend think that the police, society and Parliament can do to make sure that there never will in the future be such senseless murders again?
Mr. Speaker, I sympathise very much with Luke's family and his friends, and there's nothing I can say to alleviate their loss. But what we are doing, Mr. Speaker, is recruiting many more police officers to fight crime, rolling up the county lines, drugs, gangs, wherever we can, and setting out plans to keep serious sexual and violent offenders behind bars for longer. And I can tell the House that we've now got 6,620 of our target extra 20,000 police already recruited.
Patrick Grady.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the Prime Minister is the proud leader of a British nationalist party, and he says that his no to another independence referendum in Scotland is final. So why are his colleagues in Scotland distributing leaflets that say a vote for the Tories is a vote to stop an independence referendum? If a vote for the British nationalist Tories in Scotland must be accepted as a legitimate vote against a referendum, surely a vote for the SNP in May must be respected as a mandate for putting Scotland's future in Scotland's hands.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to hear a sort of acceptance there that he's running a nationalist party. If that's what he was saying, because I'm afraid I agree with that. They're not in respect of the whole of this country. But I think most people will think it extraordinary that they're talking about another referendum. The Labour Chief Whip is nodding quite rightly when actually what the people of this country want to see is us working together as one united kingdom without further constitutional upheaval to get through the pandemic and build back better.
Sarah Brittle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I firstly just say how great it was to welcome my right honourable friend to Accrington last week, and I'm sure the Prime Minister will join me in thanking both the staff and pupils at Accrington Academy for making our visit such a welcoming one. As you'll know, Mr. Speaker, my constituency was at the heart of the first industrial revolution, and we're ready to lead in the new green industrial revolution and level up once and for all. So on that note, will my right honourable friend commit to supporting my campaign to rejuvenate our high streets and town centres across Hyndburn and Haslingden?
Mr. Speaker, I congratulate my honourable friend on her campaign. It was great to be in Accrington, and I hope that she'll be hearing even more shortly from my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, about what we can do to support the Towns Fund and other measures to help Accrington and places across the whole country, Mr. Speaker.
We're now heading up to Amy Callaghan. Oh no, I do welcome back again. Good to see you. Amy Callaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank you and members across the House, including the Prime Minister, for your well wishes during my illness. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister had previously guaranteed there was no threat to the Erasmus scheme as a result of Brexit. We now know that charities such as Stand International in my constituency, who participate in the programme, are set to lose 96% of their funding as a result of the UK Government's decision to pull the plug on Erasmus+. Can the Prime Minister guarantee that charities will receive match funding under the new Turing scheme? And will he agree to meet with me and representatives from Stand International to ensure no young person in East Bartonshire gets left behind as a result of Brexit?
I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say how much I welcome the Honourable Lady back to PMQs. It's great to see her back, Mr. Speaker. And I do give her this assurance that I think the Turing scheme will be better and it will deliver exactly what she wants, because I think if there was a criticism of the Erasmus schemes, it tended to favour higher income households. We will do everything that we can with the Turing scheme to reach out to give opportunity to people from disadvantaged backgrounds. That is what we intend to do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend has taken a strong personal interest in the tragic story of my constituent Harry Dunn. So can I ask him, will he please continue to do everything in his power to reassure Tim and Charlotte, Harry's parents, and all their family, that he will try to persuade President Biden to deliver justice for Harry?
I thank my right honourable friend, and she's completely right to continue to raise the case of Harry Dunn, and we sympathise deeply with his family. It's a case that we continue to raise at the highest level, and I know that my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, has only just raised it now with Tony Blinken, US Secretary of State.
Let's head to Beth Winter. Beth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rhondda Cynon Taf, where my constituency of Cynarfalli is located, has the third highest COVID death rate in the UK, due mainly to inequality, poverty and chronic underfunding. This UK government has an appalling record on providing Wales with even a fair share of UK spending, let alone the funding needed to level up. 11 years of Tory austerity cuts destroyed the capacity of our public services to withstand the pandemic, and now he plans to bypass the democratic structures in Wales. My constituent Lyndon has a question for the Prime Minister. What will it take for him to stop ignoring the South Wales valleys?
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid I disagree profoundly with the implication of what she is saying, and indeed with what her constituent Linda is by implication asking, because this government continues to give massive support through the Barnett formula and elsewhere. I think through Barnett alone it's £2.4 billion, and there is now more coming, Mr. Speaker, through the Levelling Up Fund and other means. And it's thanks to the UK government that the furlough scheme has supported 3,400 jobs in her constituency alone, Mr. Speaker, and that is one of the advantages of the United Kingdom.
Let's go to Andrew Bowie. Andrew.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Only this week, the government once again demonstrated its commitment to the energy industry, jobs in the northeast of Scotland as a whole, with over £30 million committed to creating a green energy transition zone and a global underwater hub. But would my right honourable friend therefore go further and support this most vital industry, vital to developing the energy technologies of the future, based, he will agree, in the greatest part of the country, transitioning to net zero with a long-awaited energy transition deal, which will help transform the oil capital of Europe into the green energy centre of the world?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I really congratulate my honourable friend on his last-minute lobbying. He's only got a few minutes to wait before he may hear something to his advantage.
Let's go to Carla Lockhart. Carla.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, in an interview with Sophie Ridge broadcast on the 8th of December 2019, you pledged there would be no checks on goods going from NI to GB or from GB to NI. While this has proven more challenging to deliver in practice, would you wish to take this opportunity to encourage ministers in Northern Ireland to do all they can?
Order. Unfortunately, I'm not responsible, and you is not something that we should be using.
My humble apologies. Can you make this an aspiration to reality and to ensure they act in accordance with Section 46 of the United Kingdom Internal Market Act 2020, which stresses the importance of facilitating the free flow of goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I certainly can do that, and as I said in answer to another right honourable gentleman from her party, we leave nothing off the table in order to make sure that we get that done, and there is unfettered access, NIGB and GBNI.
Let's head to Andrew Percy. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has been a good friend of East Yorkshire and Northern Lincolnshire, and he will be aware that the Humber is the biggest trading estuary in the country and contains the UK's biggest port. So can I encourage him, therefore, to look at the Humber Freeport bid closely and also favourably, as it contains sites in Hull, Goole, Grimsby and the Scunthorpe Steelworks, which are really important for this region's future.
He's absolutely right, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend has mounted an excellent campaign, and the Chancellor, my honourable friend, the Chancellor, will be saying more about that a little shortly.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HS2 reduces journey times from Manchester Airport to London from 2 hours 24 minutes to 59 minutes. With the carbon capture that we would generate and the increased capacity to the West Coast main line, can I ask the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, what prevents governments from putting shovels in the ground in the north now?
Mr. Speaker, the answer to that is, as anybody knows who gets a project done on their home or wherever, if you start again midway through, I'm afraid you greatly multiply the cost, but we're going to go as fast as we possibly can.
Final question, Danny Kruger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last time the UK hosted the G7 in 2013, the then Prime Minister launched the Social Impact Investment Task Force to catalyse a market for private capital seeking social outcomes as well as financial returns. And this country now leads the world in the development of financial innovations for public good. So will my right honourable friend confirm that the social investment tax relief, which was launched after that summit, will continue beyond April? And will he use this year's G7 to trumpet to the world the benefit of social investment, social enterprise and the social economy in general?
My honourable friend has long been a campaigner for the wonderful benefits of social enterprise. I visited some of his own, and if he just waits a little bit longer, he'll receive an update on social investment tax relief, Mr. Speaker.
I'm suspending the House for 3 minutes to enable the necessary arrangements for the next business to be made. Order.
Order! Order! Before I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I remind honourable members that copies of the budget resolutions will be available from the Vote Office in Members' Lobby upon the Chancellor's statement being finished, and of course, online. I also remind honourable members that interventions are not taken during the Chancellor's statement, nor during the replies of either the Leader of the Opposition or the Leader of the Scottish National Party. I also just mentioned that British Sign Language interpretation will continue until the end of the speech of the Leader of the Scottish National Party, and it's available to watch, quick advert here, on parliamentlive.tv. Mr. Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, a year ago, in my first budget, I announced our initial response to coronavirus. What was originally thought to be a temporary disruption to our way of life has fundamentally altered it. People are still being told to stay in their homes. Businesses have been ordered to close. Thousands of people are in hospital. Much has changed, but one thing has stayed the same. I said I would do whatever it takes. I have done, and I will do so. We have announced over £280 billion of support, protecting jobs, keeping businesses afloat, helping families get by. Despite this unprecedented response, the damage coronavirus has done to our economy has been acute. Since March, over 700,000 people have lost their jobs. Our economy has shrunk by 10%, the largest fall in over 300 years. Our borrowing is the highest it has been outside of wartime. It's going to take this country and the whole world a long time to recover from this extraordinary economic situation. But we will recover. This budget meets the moment with a three-part plan to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. First, we will continue doing whatever it takes to support the British people and businesses through this moment of crisis. Second, once we are on the way to recovery, we will need to begin fixing the public finances, and I want to be honest today about our plans to do that. And third, in today's budget, we begin the work of building our future economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, today's forecasts show that our response to coronavirus is working. The Prime Minister last week set out our cautious but irreversible roadmap to ease restrictions whilst protecting the British people. The NHS, deserving of immense praise, has had extraordinary success in vaccinating more than 20 million people across the United Kingdom. And combined with our economic response, one of the most comprehensive and generous in the world, this means the Office for Budget Responsibility are now forecasting, in their words, a swifter and more sustained recovery than they expected in November. The OBR now expect the economy to return to its pre-COVID level by the middle of next year, 6 months earlier than previously thought. That means growth is faster, unemployment lower, wages higher, investment higher, household incomes higher. But while our prospects are now stronger, coronavirus has done and is still doing profound damage. And today's forecasts make clear repairing the long-term damage will take time. The OBRs still expect that in 5 years' time, because of coronavirus, our economy will be 3% smaller than it would have been. Before I share the detail of the OBR's forecast,
let me thank Richard Hughes and his team for their work. The OBR forecast that our economy will grow this year by 4%, by 7.3% in 2022, then 1.7%, 1.6% and 1.7% in the last 3 years of the forecast. And the OBR have said that our interventions to support jobs have worked. In July last year, they expected unemployment to peak at 11.9%. Today, because of our interventions, they forecast a much lower peak, 6.5%. That means 1.8 million fewer people are expected to be out of work than previously thought. But every job lost is a tragedy, which is why protecting, creating, and supporting jobs remains my highest priority. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn straight away to the first part of this budget's plan to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people through the remaining phase of this crisis. First, the furlough scheme will be extended until the end of September. For employees, there will be no change to the terms. They will continue to receive 80% of their salary for hours not worked until the scheme ends. As businesses reopen, we will ask them to contribute alongside the taxpayer to the cost of paying their employees. Nothing will change until July, when we will ask for a small contribution of just 10% and 20% in August and September. The government is proud of the furlough, one of the most generous schemes in the world, effectively protecting millions of people's jobs and incomes. Second, support for the self-employed will also continue until September, with a fourth grant covering the period February to April and a fifth and final grant from May onwards. The fourth grant will provide 3 months of support at 80% of average trading profits. For the fifth grant, people will continue to receive grants worth 3 months of average profits, with the system open for claims from late July. But as the economy reopens over the summer, it is fair to target our support towards those most affected by the pandemic. So people whose turnover has fallen by 30% or more will continue to receive the full 80% grant. People whose turnover has fallen by less than 30% will therefore have less need of taxpayer support and will receive a 30% grant. And I can also announce a major improvement in access to the self-employed scheme. When the scheme was launched, the newly self-employed couldn't qualify because they hadn't all filed the 1920 tax return. But as the tax return deadline has now passed, I can announce today that provided they filed a tax return by midnight last night, over 600,000 more people, many of whom became self-employed last year, can now claim the fourth and fifth grants. Over the course of this crisis, we will have spent £33 billion supporting the self-employed, one of the most generous programmes for self-employed people anywhere in the world. Third, we're also extending our support for the lowest paid and most vulnerable. To support low-income households, the universal credit uplift of £20 a week will continue for a further 6 months, well beyond the end of this national lockdown. We'll provide working tax credit claimants with equivalent support for the next 6 months. And because of the way that system works operationally, we will need to do so with a one-off payment of £500. And over the course of this year, as the economy begins to recover, we are shifting our resources and focus towards getting people into decent, well-paid jobs. We reaffirm our commitment to end low pay, increasing the national living wage to £8.91 from April, an annual pay rise of almost £350 for someone working full-time on the national living wage. And my right honourable friends, the Education Secretary and the Work and Pension Secretary are taking action to give people the skills they need to get jobs or get better jobs. The Restart programme, supporting over 1 million long-term unemployed people. The number of work coaches doubled. The Kickstart scheme, funding high-quality jobs for over 250,000 young people. The Prime Minister's Lifetime Skills Guarantee, giving every adult the opportunity for a fully funded Level 3 qualification. And we want businesses to hire new apprentices, so we're paying them more to do it. Today, I am doubling the incentive payments we give businesses to £3,000. That's for all new apprentice hires of any age. Alongside investing £126 million of new money to triple the number of traineeships, we're taking what works to get people into jobs and making it better. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the hidden tragedies of lockdown has been the increase in domestic abuse. So I'm announcing today an extra £19 million on top of the £125 million we announced at the spending review for domestic violence programmes to reduce the risk of reoffending and to pilot a network of respite rooms to provide specialist support for vulnerable homeless women. To recognise the sacrifices made by so many women and men in the armed forces community, I'm providing an additional £10 million to support veterans with mental health needs. And on current plans, the funding to support survivors of the thalidomide scandal runs out in 2023. They deserve better than to have constant uncertainty about the future costs of their care. So not only will I extend this funding with an initial down payment of around £40 million, I am today announcing a lifetime commitment guaranteeing funding forever. And let me thank the Thalidomide Trust and the Honourable Member for North Dorset for their leadership on this important issue. As well as supporting people's jobs, incomes, the lowest paid and most vulnerable, this budget also protects businesses. We've been providing businesses with direct cash grants through the recent restrictions. These grants come to an end in March. I can announce today that we will provide a new Restart grant in April to help businesses reopen and get going again. Non-essential retail businesses will open first, so they will receive grants of up to £6,000 per premises. Hospitality and leisure businesses, including personal care and gyms, will open later or be more impacted by restrictions when they do, so we'll give them grants of up to £18,000. That's £5 billion of new grants, on top of the £20 billion we've already provided, taking our direct total cash support to business to £25 billion. And I pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for Romsey and Southampton North, for highlighting the particular needs of the personal care sector. And with my right honourable friend, the Culture Secretary, we're making available £700 million to support our incredible arts, culture and sporting institutions as they reopen. Backing the UK and Ireland's joint 2030 World Cup bid, launching a new approach to apprenticeships in the creative industries, and extending our £500 million film and TV production restart scheme. Even with the new restart grants, some businesses will also need loans to see them through. As the Bounce Back Loan and CBILS programmes come to an end, we're introducing a new recovery loan scheme to take their place. Businesses of any size can apply for loans from £25,000 up to £10 million through to the end of this year, and the government will provide a guarantee to lenders of 80%. Last year, we provided an unprecedented 100% business rates holiday in England for all eligible businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors. A tax cut worth £10 billion. This year, we'll continue with the 100% business rates holiday for the first 3 months of the year, in other words, through to the end of June. For the remaining 9 months of the year, business rates will still be discounted by 2/3, up to a value of £2 million for closed businesses, with a lower cap for those who have been able to stay open. A £6 billion tax cut for business. One of the hardest hit sectors has been hospitality and tourism. 150,000 businesses that employ over 2.4 million people need our support. To protect those jobs, I can confirm that the 5% reduced rate of VAT will be extended for 6 months to the 30th of September. And even then, we won't go straight back to the 20% rate. We'll have an interim rate of 12.5% for another 6 months, not returning to the standard rate until April of next year. In total, we're cutting VAT next year by almost £5 billion. Madam Deputy Speaker, the housing sector supports over 500,000 jobs. The cut in stamp duty I announced last summer has helped hundreds of thousands of people buy a home and supported the economy at a critical time. But due to the sheer volume of transactions we're seeing, many new purchases won't complete in time for the end of March. So I can announce today the £500,000 nil rate band will not end on the 31st of March, it will end on the 30th of June. Then, to smooth the transition back to normal, the nil rate band will be £250,000, double its standard level, until the end of September, and we will only return to the usual level of £125,000 from October the 1st. Even with the stamp duty cut, there is still a significant barrier to people getting on the housing ladder: the cost of a deposit. So I'm announcing today a new policy to stand behind home buyers, a mortgage guarantee. Lenders who provide mortgages to home buyers who can only afford a 5% deposit will benefit from a government guarantee on those mortgages. And I'm pleased to say that several of the country's largest lenders, including Lloyds, NatWest, Santander, Barclays and HSBC, will be offering these 95% mortgages from next month. And I know more, including Virgin Money, will follow shortly after. A policy that gives people who can't afford a big deposit the chance to buy their own home. As the Prime Minister has said, we want to turn generation rent into generation buy. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, the furlough extended to September. Self-employed grants extended to September. Universal credit uplift extended to September. More money to tackle domestic violence, bigger incentives to hire apprentices, higher grants to struggling businesses, extra funds for culture, arts and sport, new loan schemes to finance businesses, kickstart, restart, a lifetime skills guarantee, business rates cut, VAT cut, stamp duty cut, and a new mortgage guarantee, the first part of a budget that protects the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you can see, we're going long, extending our support well beyond the end of the roadmap to accommodate even the most cautious view about the time it might take to exit the restrictions. Let me summarise for the House the scale of our total fiscal response to coronavirus. At this budget, we are announcing an additional £65 billion of measures over this year and next to support the economy in response to coronavirus. Taking into account the significant support announced at the spending review, this means our total COVID support package this year and next is £352 billion. And once you include the measures announced at spring budget last year, including the step change in capital investment, total fiscal support from this government over this year and next amounts to £407 billion. Coronavirus has caused one of the largest, most comprehensive and sustained economic shocks this country has ever faced. And by any objective analysis, this government has delivered one of the largest, most comprehensive and sustained responses this country has ever seen. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're using the full measure of our fiscal firepower to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. But the damage done by coronavirus, combined with a level of support unimaginable only 12 months ago, has created huge challenges for our public finances. The OBR's fiscal forecasts show that this year we have borrowed a record amount, £355 billion. That's 17% of our national income, the highest level of borrowing since World War II. Next year, as we continue our unprecedented response to this crisis, borrowing is forecast to be £234 billion, 10.3% of GDP, an amount so large it has only one rival in recent history, this year. Without corrective action, borrowing would continue at very high levels, leaving underlying debt rising indefinitely. Instead, because of the steps I am taking today, borrowing falls to 4.5% of GDP in 22-23, 3.5% in 23-24, then 2.9% and 2.8% in the following 2 years. And while underlying debt rises from 88.8% of GDP this year to 93.8% next year, it then peaks at 97.1% in 23-24 before stabilising and falling slightly to 97% and 96.8% in the final 2 years of the forecast. Let me explain why this matters. The amount we've borrowed is comparable only with the amount we borrowed during the 2 world wars. It's going to be the work of many governments over many decades to pay it back. Just as it would be irresponsible to withdraw support too soon, it would also be irresponsible to allow our future borrowing and debt to rise unchecked. When crises come, we need to be able to act, and we need the fiscal freedom to act. A freedom that you only have if you start with public finances in a good and strong place. The only reason we have been able to respond as boldly as we have to COVID is because 10 years of Conservative governments painstakingly rebuilt our fiscal resilience. When the next crisis comes, we need to be able to act again. And while our borrowing costs are affordable right now, interest rates and inflation may not stay low forever, and just a 1 percentage point increase in both would now cost us over £25 billion. And as we have seen in the markets over the last few weeks, sovereign bond yields can rise sharply. This budget is not the time to set detailed fiscal rules with precise targets and dates to achieve them by. I don't believe that would be sensible. But I do want to be honest about what I mean by sustainable public finances and how I plan to achieve them. Our fiscal decisions are guided by 3 principles. First, while it is right to help people and businesses through an acute crisis like this one, in normal times, the state should not be borrowing to pay for everyday public spending. Second, over the medium term, we cannot allow our debt to keep rising. And given how high our debt now is, we need to pay close attention to its affordability. And third, it is sensible to take advantage of lower interest rates to invest in capital projects that can drive our future growth. So the question is, how we achieve that, how we balance the extraordinary support we are providing to the economy right now with the need to begin the work of fixing our public finances. I have and always will be honest with the country about the challenges we face. So I'm announcing today 2 measures to begin that work. Let me take each in turn. Madam Deputy Speaker, our response to coronavirus has been fair, with the poorest households benefiting the most from our interventions. And our approach to fixing the public finances will be fair too, asking more of those people and businesses who can afford to contribute and protecting those who cannot. So this government is not going to raise the rates of income tax, national insurance or VAT. Instead, our first step is to freeze personal tax thresholds. We've nearly doubled the income tax personal allowance over the last decade, making it the most generous of any G20 country. We will, of course, deliver our promise to increase it again next year to £12,570, but we will then keep it at this more generous level until April 2026. The higher rate threshold will similarly be increased next year to £50,000 270, and will then also remain at that level for the same period. Nobody's take-home pay will be less than it is now as a result of this policy. But I want to be clear with all members that this policy does remove the incremental benefit created had thresholds continued to increase with inflation. We are not hiding it. I am here explaining it to the House, and it is in the budget document in black and white. It is a tax policy that is progressive and fair. And I will also maintain at their current levels until April 2026 the inheritance tax thresholds, the pensions lifetime allowance, the annual exempt amount in capital gains tax, and for 2 years from April 2022 the VAT registration threshold, which at £85,000 will remain more than twice as generous as the EU and OECD averages. We'll also tackle fraud in our COVID schemes with £100 million to set up a new HMRC task force of around 1,000 investigators, as well as new measures and new investment in HMRC to clamp down on tax avoidance and evasion. The full details are set out in the Red Book. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government is providing businesses with over £100 billion of support to get through this pandemic. So it is fair and necessary to ask them to contribute to our recovery. So the second step I am taking today is that in 2023, the rate of corporation tax paid on company profits will increase to 25%. Even after this change, the United Kingdom will still have the lowest corporation tax rate in the G7, lower than the United States, Canada, Italy, Japan, Germany, and France. We're also introducing some crucial protections. First, this new higher rate won't take effect until April 2023, well after the point when the OBR expect the economy to have recovered. And even then, because corporation tax is only charged on company profits, any struggling business will, by definition, be unaffected. Second, I'm protecting small businesses with profits of £50,000 or less by creating a small profits rate maintained at the current rate of 19%. This means around 70% of companies, 1.4 million businesses, will be completely unaffected. And third, we will introduce a taper above 50,000 so that only businesses with profits of £250,000 or greater will be taxed at the full 25% rate. That means only 10% of companies will pay the full higher rate. So yes, it's a tax rise on company profits, but only on the larger, more profitable companies, and only in 2 years' time. And I wanted to announce this now because I think for business, certainty matters. For the next 2 years, I'm also making the tax treatment of losses significantly more generous by allowing businesses to carry back losses of up to £2 million for 3 years, providing a significant cash flow benefit. This means companies can now claim additional tax refunds of up to £760,000. And because of the current 8% bank surcharge, the implied overall tax rate for banks would be too high. So we will review the surcharge to make sure the combined rate of tax on the UK banking sector doesn't increase significantly from its current level, and to make sure this important industry remains internationally competitive. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are significant decisions to have taken. Decisions no Chancellor wants to make. I recognise they might not be popular, but they are honest. And let's consider the alternatives. The first is to do nothing, to leave our deficit problem untreated, our debt problem for someone else in the future to deal with. That has never been the way of a Conservative government, and nor do I believe it can be the way of a responsible Chancellor. Another alternative would be to try and find all the savings we need from public spending. But when we said at the last election that we were the party of public services, people believed us, and they were right to believe us. And when we said we'd be the party that invests in new infrastructure, they were right to believe that too. The only other alternative would be to increase the rates of tax on working people. But I don't believe that would be right either. So I believe our approach, while bold, is compatible with our duty as a fiscally responsible and business-friendly government. This is the right choice, and I am confident it will command public assent. I have one final announcement on business tax. With the lowest corporation tax in the G7 and a new small profits rate, the UK will have a pro-business tax regime. But we need to do even more to encourage businesses to invest right now. Business investment creates jobs, lifts growth, spurs innovation and drives productivity. For decades, we've lagged behind our international peers. Right now, while many businesses are struggling, others have been able to build up significant cash reserves. We need to unlock that investment. We need an investment-led recovery. So today, I can announce the super deduction. For the next 2 years, when companies invest, they can reduce their tax bill, not just by a proportion of the cost of that investment as they do now, or even by 100% of their cost, the so-called full expensing that some have called for. With the super deduction, they can now reduce their tax bill by 130% of the cost. Let me give the House an example. Under the existing rules, a construction firm buying £10 million of new equipment could reduce their taxable income in the year they invest by just £2.6 million. With the super deduction, they can now reduce it by £13 million. We've never tried this before in our country. The OBR have said it will boost business investment by 10%, around £20 billion more per year. It makes our tax regime for business investment truly world-leading, lifting us from 30th in the OECD to 1st. And worth £25 billion during the 2 years it is in place, this will be the biggest business tax cut in modern British history. Bold, unprecedented action to get companies investing, creating jobs and driving our economic recovery. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me now turn to duties. This is a tough time for hospitality, so I can confirm that the planned increases in duties for spirits like Scotch whisky, wine, cider and beer will all be cancelled. All alcohol duties frozen for the second year in a row, only the third time in 2 decades. And right now, to keep the cost of living low, I'm not prepared to increase the cost of a tank of fuel. So the planned increase in fuel duty is also cancelled. Madam Deputy Speaker, this budget protects the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. This budget is honest about the challenges facing our public finances and how we will begin to fix them. And this budget does one other thing. It lays the foundations of our future economy, the third part of our plan. If we want a better future economy, we have to make it happen. We have to do things that have never been done before. The world is not going to be any less competitive after coronavirus. So it's not enough to have some general desire to grow the economy. We need a real commitment to green growth. It's not enough to have some general desire to increase productivity. We need a real commitment to give every business, large or small, the opportunity to grow, innovate and succeed. It's not enough to have a general desire to create jobs. We need a real commitment to create jobs where people are and change the economic geography of this country. And we can't strengthen our domestic economy without remaining a global, outward-looking nation. This future economy won't be created in any one budget, but today we lay the foundations. Madam Deputy Speaker, our future economy needs investment in green industries across the United Kingdom. So I can announce today the first ever UK infrastructure bank. Located in Leeds, the bank will invest across the UK in public and private projects to finance the green industrial revolution. Beginning this spring, it will have an initial capitalisation of £12 billion, and we expect it to support at least £40 billion of total investment in infrastructure. And I know my right honourable friend, the member for Pudsey, will particularly welcome the location of this new institution. Offshore wind is an innovative industry where the UK already has a global competitive advantage. So we're funding new port infrastructure to build the next generation of offshore wind projects in Teesside and Humberside. And in November, I announced we would launch a world-leading sovereign green bond. Today, we're going further, announcing a new retail savings product to give all UK savers the chance to support green projects, as my right honourable friend, the member for North East Bedfordshire, has campaigned for. We've also asked Dame Clara First to establish a new group to position the city as the global leader for voluntary, high-quality carbon offset markets, and underpinning all of this will be an updated monetary policy remit for the Bank of England. It reaffirms their 2% target, but now it will also reflect the importance of environmental sustainability and the transition to net zero. Madam Deputy Speaker, our future economy will also address our productivity problem and support small business. Too often, smaller firms don't have the time or resources to acquire the extra skills and training they need to be more efficient, more digital and more productive. Thanks to Be the Business, we have made a good start at supporting these firms. Today, the Business Secretary and I are going further with a new set of UK-wide schemes, Help to Grow. First, Help to Grow management will help tens of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses get world-class management training. Dozens of business schools across the UK will offer a new executive development programme with mentoring and peer learning, and government will contribute 90% of the cost. A real commitment to learn more, make more, and earn more. Second, Help to Grow digital. With the pandemic, many businesses have moved online. This has been a challenge, but we want to turn it into an opportunity. We're going to help small businesses develop digital skills by giving them free expert training and a 50% discount on new productivity-enhancing software worth up to £5,000 each. Both programmes will commence by the autumn, and I'd urge interested businesses to register today on gov.uk/help to grow. A real commitment to help over 100,000 businesses become more innovative, more competitive, and more profitable. Madam Deputy Speaker, a future economy requires us to be at the forefront of the next scientific and technological revolutions. Becoming a scientific superpower is something we can be. I don't think that's hubristic or unrealistic. Our incredible vaccination programme has shown the world what this country is capable of. So I'm providing an extra £1.6 billion today to continue the rollout and improve our future preparedness. And I want to make the UK the best place in the world for high-growth, innovative companies. So I'm launching 2 wide-ranging consultations today to make sure our research and development tax reliefs and our enterprise management incentives are internationally competitive. And my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, knows that a scientific superpower needs scientific superstars. So together we're announcing ambitious visa reforms aimed at highly skilled migrants, including a new unsponsored points-based visa to attract the best and most promising international talent in science, research and tech, new improved visa processes for scale-ups and entrepreneurs, and radically simplified bureaucracy for high-skill visa applications. Now, as well as support for innovation and access to talent, high-growth firms need access to capital. To do that, we're taking steps to give the pensions industry more flexibility to unlock billions of pounds from pension funds into innovative new ventures, launching a new future fund breakthrough to help fill the scale-up funding gap, and changing the rules to encourage more companies to list here. Let me thank Lord Hill for leading this landmark review. The FCA will be consulting on his proposals very shortly. Madam Deputy Speaker, our future economy depends on remaining a united kingdom. Millions of families and businesses in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland have contributed to and benefited from our coronavirus response. And central to that has been a treasury that acts for the whole United Kingdom. That's not a political point, it's an undeniable truth. The majority of today's budget measures will apply directly to people in all 4 nations of the United Kingdom. And I'm taking further specific steps with 3 accelerated Scottish city and growth deals in Ayrshire, Argyll and Bute and Falkirk, 3 more in North Wales, Mid Wales and Swansea Bay, and funding for the Holyhead Hydrogen Hub, the Global Centre of Rail Excellence in Neath-Port Talbot, the Aberdeen Energy Transition Zone, as well as the Global Underwater Hub and North Sea Transition Deal, along with the first allocations of the £400 million New Deal for Northern Ireland. And through the Barnett formula, the decisions I'm taking in this budget also increase the funding for the devolved administrations by £1.2 billion in Scotland, £740 million in Wales, and £410 million for the Northern Ireland Executive. And Madam Deputy Speaker, our future economy demands a different economic geography. If we are serious about wanting to level up, that starts with the institutions of economic power. Few institutions are more powerful than the one I am enormously privileged to lead, the Treasury. Along with the other critical economic departments, including BEIS, DIT and MHCLG, we will establish a new economic campus in Darlington. And I know my honourable friend, the member for Darlington, will particularly welcome this announcement. Redrawing our economic map means rebalancing our economic investment. I have already revised the Treasury's Green Book and set out the highest sustained levels of public investment across the UK since the 1970s. But we can go further. I am announcing today over £1 billion for 45 new towns deals, from Castleford to Clay Cross, Rochdale to Rowley Regis, and Whitby to Wolverhampton. And let me pay tribute to local leaders like the brilliant Mayor for the West Midlands, Andy Street, who are making the case for investment in their area. We're also creating a £150 million fund to help communities across the UK take ownership of pubs, theatres, shops, or local sports clubs at risk of loss, putting more power in the hands of local people. And I'm launching the first round of the Levelling Up Fund today, inviting applications from local areas across the United Kingdom. And I'm grateful to my right honourable friends, the Transport Secretary and the Community Secretary, for their support on this crucial initiative. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one final announcement that exemplifies the future economy. A policy on a scale we've never done before, a policy to bring investment, trade, and most importantly, jobs right across this country, to replace the industries of the past with green, innovative, fast-growing new businesses, to encourage free trade and reinforce our position as an outward-looking trading nation open to the world, a policy we can now only pursue now that we are out of the European Union. Free ports. Free ports are special economic zones with different rules to make it easier and cheaper to do business. They're well established internationally, but we're taking a unique approach. Our free ports will have simpler planning to allow businesses to build, infrastructure funding to improve transport links, cheaper customs with favourable tariffs, VAT or duties, and lower taxes with tax breaks to encourage construction, private investment and job creation. An unprecedented economic boost across the United Kingdom. Free ports will be a truly UK-wide policy, and we will work constructively with the Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish administrations. Today, I can announce the 8 free port locations in England. East Midlands Airport, Felixstowe and Harwich, Humber, Liverpool City Region, Plymouth, Solent, Thames and Teesside. 8 new free ports in 8 English regions, unlocking billions of pounds of private sector investment, generating trade and jobs up and down the country. I commend members from across the House for their campaigning, but in particular the honourable members for Redcar, Cleethorpes and Great Grimsby, as well as inspiring local leaders like Ben Houchin, the Mayor for Tees Valley. Madam Deputy Speaker, let's take just one of those places, Teesside. In the past, it was known for its success in industries like steel. Now, when I look to the future of Teesside, I see old industrial sites being used to capture and store carbon, vaccines being manufactured, offshore wind turbines creating clean energy for the rest of the country, all located within a free port with a treasury just down the road and the UK Infrastructure Bank only an hour away. I see innovative, fast-growing businesses hiring local people into decent, well-paid green jobs. I see people designing, manufacturing and exporting incredible new products and services. I see people putting down roots in places they are proud to call home. I see a people optimistic and ambitious for their future. That, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the future economy of this country. And so, whilst this last year has been a test unlike any other, that which we are, we are. The fundamentals of our character as a people have not changed. Still determined, still generous, still fair. That's what got us through the last year. It's what will guide us through the next decade and beyond. This time last year, we set out to deliver on the promises we made to the British people. But the most important promise was implicit and in truth is made by every government, irrespective of their politics. And that is to do what must be done when the danger is imminent and when no one else can. Today, we set out a plan to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. But the promises that underpin that plan remain unchanged from those we pledged ourselves to 12 long months ago. To unite and lead, to level up, to create a world-class education system, to keep our streets safe, to keep our NHS strong, to support the most vulnerable, to reform and improve public services, to grow the economy, to spread prosperity, to extend the awesome power of opportunity to all corners of the United Kingdom, and yes, to be honest and fair in all that we do. Madam Deputy Speaker, an important moment is upon us. A moment of challenge and of change. Of difficulties, yes, but of possibilities too. This is a budget that meets that moment, and I commend it to the House.
I thank the Chancellor of the Exchequer for his budget statement, and just before I call the Leader of the Opposition, there are a few immediate items to be dealt with. Under Standing Order number 51, the first motion, entitled Provisional Collection of Taxes, must be decided without debate. Will the Chancellor of the Exchequer please move it formally?
Beg to move.
The question is that, pursuant to Section 5 of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968, provisional statutory effect shall be given to the following motions. Repeal of provisions relating to the Interest and Royalties Directive, motion number 31. Stamp duty, land tax, housing cooperatives, etc., motion number 44. Annual tax on enveloped dwellings, housing cooperatives, motion number 45. Customs duty, removal of steel to Northern Ireland, motion number 52. As mayors that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. So we now come to the motion entitled Income Tax Charge. It's on this motion that the debate will take place today and on the succeeding days. The questions on this motion and on the remaining motions will be put at the end of the budget debate on Tuesday, the 9th of March. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer to move the motion formally.
I beg to move.
The question is that income tax is charged for the tax year 2021 to 22, and it is declared that it is expedient in the public interest that this resolution should have statutory effect under the provisions of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968. I call the Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. After 11 months in this job, it's nice finally to be standing opposite the person actually making decisions in this government.